Welcome to Mental Healthy, the podcast where we share stories of the professionals and experts worldwide working in the mental health field. Here's your host, Dr. Kenyon Knapp.
Welcome, everyone, to the Mental Healthy Podcast. I'm glad to have you with us here today. I've got a great guest today, Chris Casola, who's the Senior Association Athletics Director for Student Athlete Welfare and Performance. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Knapp. It's good to be here.
I appreciate it. Thank
All
you.
right.
Yeah, we're going to be talking a little bit today about sports psychology, which I'll be honest, y'all, I don't really know much about that. But I'm going to be learning from you. But before we get into that, why don't you just share with us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. So as my title says, Senior Associate Athletic Director, I oversee student welfare and performance, which basically means I oversee what we call champion performance.
Mm-hmm.
Champion performance is an umbrella term to kind of define a lot of different areas of performance that happen in athletics: nutrition, sports medicine, strength and conditioning. Mental health is also a big part of that. Our spiritual development's part of that. Academics is a part of that, although I don't directly oversee that endeavor. We have some other folks that take on that very large responsibility and do a very good job with it. But we're all kind of integrated together. So I get to oversee the people that work in a lot of those areas and oversee the integration of those areas working together holistically to develop and take care of our student athletes.
Yeah, that's the vibe I'm getting from what you're saying. You said spiritual, mental health, academic. It sounds like you guys try to conceptualize your students in a real big picture kind of way.
We do. We my first responsibility when I got back, or my first challenge, was to make sure that we're not working in silos, to make sure that we are, each department that I listed, we're working together. And that we're treating the whole person, right? Mind, body, and spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not just looking, for example, at a knee injury. We're looking at that student athlete holistically and what other things might be affecting their recovery or playing a part in how they're doing, whether that's their mental health and their nutrition, as they're dealing with injuries and things like that. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you use a number of terms in your field of work that I'm less familiar with. So I wrote down a few terms I wasn't quite familiar with. I guess my question is, why does athletics use the designation of mental performance, quote unquote, when describing mental health, mental well-being, and sports psychology? Like what is mental performance?
Yeah, so athletes perform, right? And so that's a term that resonates with them, and it's in all area of their life. So it's not just physical performance; it's academic performance. It's even, I could even throw spiritual performance into that grouping as well. So it's we do that for a couple reasons. Number one, it's an umbrella term, right? So it when we talk in terms of mental health, there's so much that goes into mental wellness, right? Mental well-being, behavioral health, the psychology of an athlete, the psychology of sports. So we use this umbrella term of mental performance to kind of throw all of that into it. The other thing we do is we're constantly trying to reduce stigma, right? So especially around mental health. So calling something or labeling something as performance or attacking that from that perspective, I think helps to kind of reduce some of the stigma around mental health issues. And we find too, we have counseling services are kind of our first defense, but we'll find too when some of our student athletes get into counseling, that it might not be a clinical thing that they're dealing with. It might actually be a performance-based anxiety that they're dealing with or something like that. So I think the broader term helps, A, reduce stigma, and B, kind of not kind of pigeonhole everything that a student athlete might be dealing with as mental health.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I know you're dealing with Division I athletes all the time, NCAA Division I athletes all the time, and in my teeny little bit of athletic experience, I remember when I used to run in high school in Oz on the track team, sometimes when I had a race, like I'd get an upset stomach or things like that just due to anxiety from running. And I guess but you probably deal with it on like a way more higher level of all kinds of symptomology with athletes, because I guess the way anxiety can affect you can affect your performance.
Yeah, it does. And you know, that's why it's so important, I think, when we look at some of our strategies as we're trying to take care of athletes, even if it is a clinical mental health issue that we're dealing with, that spills into all areas of their life. You take say a soccer player, for instance, who is kind of maybe struggling with a mental health issue. In just a week's time or just 10 days' time, they may have 2 to 4 competitions that issue is kind of spilling into. And so that's why we try to set up, and I know we'll talk a little bit about strategies, but that's why we try to be as quick and efficient with those things. You know.
Well, let's go there. I mean, we've talked about what this subject is, you know, as far as mental performance, but what are some of the systems and strategies you do here at Liberty to help the students with their mental performance per se?
Yeah. So I'll backtrack a little bit, and I'll talk about kind of the genesis of where we are today.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about best practices, right? So NCAA has best practices, and coming out of COVID, there was a transformation committee that the NCAA put together. They were just looking at ways of how do we create a better holistic model for student athletes. And so the NCAA in general has always been on the forefront, at least in medicine, to create thresholds and standards, best practices, if you will, that they wanted colleges and universities that call themselves NCAA institutions, to abide by. But those were always suggestions, as best practices. Fortunately here, for us, we're well resourced. I think we're very forward thinking, and so we've always done a good job of staying up or ahead of the minimum standards. So out of this committee, they came out with a holistic student athlete model, and that model said or it mandated that Division I institutions, NCAA Division I institutions, had to now follow best practices. Like, they weren't suggestions anymore. So now you have to attest, that you're following them. Well, fortunately for us, we were already following most of them. We had to tighten up a few things and kind of maybe define some things that we were already doing, but just kind of put them on paper and make sure that we had those buttoned up. So within those, we'll speak specifically to mental health. There were 3 primary charges within that. One was, the first one was culture. Institutions have to create a culture for student athletes that allows them the freedom and the openness to get help when they need it for mental health. So again, that's not really been a problem here. I think the health and well-being of our student athletes has always been a priority for us. So there's culture. That's the first thing. The second thing was education. We need to make sure that we're educating not only the student athletes, but we're also educating the staff. We need to make sure that our sports medicine staff is taking time every year to talk to our student athletes about what services are available. And we try to do a good job with our counselors and others to get in front of our student athletes and our teams and talk about, some strategies for them, maybe preventatively, or just talk about concepts and issues that they might be going with, and allow them to, let them know that they have a resource if they need help with something. But also educating our staff on, hey, these might be some signs, or these might be some things that you're seeing, in your student athletes that might give you maybe scratch your head a little bit
Yeah.
but maybe kind of push you to, say something, if not directly to the student athlete, to some of the performance staff to make sure that someone's checking in on them and making sure that they're okay. So second part was education, and the third part is care,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we needed to make sure we have a good system in place to take care of our student athletes. So 6 years ago, we brought in counseling services inside of athletics, and we
Mm-hmm.
had a full-time counselor with athletics. We since have added another person just based on need and volume.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 2 individuals right now that help to service our student athletes. They're embedded right within athletics and in the Liberty Athletic Center. So student athletes can go to them directly. They can go to their athletic trainer. They can really go to any staff person and say, hey, I need some help. I want to go talk to someone.
Mm-hmm.
We can quickly get them plugged into that. So that's, from a staffing standpoint, that's
Yeah.
kind of where we are. Our staff works closely with CAPS. So we also have them.
What is CAPS, just so listeners who may not know?
Yeah, counseling and psychology, psychological services.
That's right, yeah.
Which is the mental health service that's provided to the entire campus,
Mm-hmm.
all together. So we're not on an island,
Mhm.
in what we do. We're connected well with our healthcare providers, CHP,
Yeah.
and also through CAPS. So we wanted, when we set out to do this initiative a long time ago, we wanted to make sure we weren't taking on this burden
Yeah.
without the connection and the oversight of some of those other parties.
Yeah, it makes me think as we're talking about this. I mean, you and I both live here in Lynchburg, but some of the people listening may not have been on campus or things like that. And I actually have a son who's a athlete here. I won't go into all that. That's a rabbit trail. but so I'm a little more familiar with what you have. But for those who are listening and they live in another part of the country, how many students are we talking about? Are we talking about like 50 athletes here or 5,000? Or like how many people do you all help with the services you provide?
Yeah, on the athletic side, we have about 550
Okay.
athletes, and that fluctuates somewhere between 5 and 600
Yeah.
student athletes. So
That's a pretty good crew,
Mhm.
especially with the depth of services that you guys provide. Like, I mean, I've been to the Liberty Athletic Center where you work, and you've got a lot of dedicated people and physical therapists and physicians and all different. I don't even remember what you all have.
we do. We're very blessed that way. We've essentially created I like to think of it as more of a functional medicine ecosystem, right?
Mhm.
So all the things that you think you would need from A to Z in terms of physical health, mental health, even spiritual,
Mhm.
guidance and things like that. We try to do as conveniently and efficiently under one roof as we can. We bring we have a great group of team physicians that we work
Mhm.
with that are on in our athletic center
Mm-hmm.
every day of the week. We have orthopedics that we bring in,
Mm-hmm.
chiropractors and physical therapists, and
Mm-hmm.
just to create an ecosystem of care. Because time, it's all about time,
Yeah.
right? We're very short on time. We got to get things figured out pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I mean, I'm blown away at all that you guys do, and I know one of the things you have there is something you call the Resiliency Lab,
Yeah.
and that was pretty cool to me. But tell the listeners about that a little bit and what it does.
Yeah. So if we go back to best practices, right?
Mhm.
So the NCAA in all that they said about best practices, the thing that stood out to me was we're charged to take care of our athletes in a way that makes them resilient, right?
Mhm.
We're not trying to make them, provide them so many services, that they don't, in that process, become less resilient or they don't
Yeah.
become resilient. So, fortunately, even before that, we developed what we called the Resilience Lab.
Yeah.
And so we partnered. One of the first people I met when I came back here on staff 7 years ago was Dr. Tim Royer, and Doc had already been kind of doing some stuff with our athletes more in the neurofeedback world. He's a neuropsychologist. He had been doing a couple things with just maybe a handful of athletes, and it was very deep and very a very deep method or intervention, but it wasn't scalable, right? So it was just hitting just a few of our student athletes. So we worked over the next couple years to kind of make something that was a lot more scalable, I should say.
Yeah.
A lot more sustainable. And in the process, we worked together and developed what we have today, which is the Resilience Lab, and it focuses on three different things. The first one is vision, and this all started as a performance enhancement tool, and it is a performance enhancement tool.
Absolutely.
So it works on vision, and so basically what we're doing with vision is we're working on binocular vision. We're trying to strengthen the muscles of the eyes, because the eyes, when you look at all the data that an athlete, that any person really is taking in every moment of the day, the vast majority of that is visual, right? And so if we don't have athletes that have strong visual fields, like they're not seeing their world three-dimensionally, they're not good at gauging depth perception. Not only are they a disadvantage from a performance standpoint, their cognition suffers, right? So cognition, see, act, decide, if we broke it down into its simplest forms, right? So see, act, decide starts with vision. And so we want to train our student athletes to have the best visual information that they can, as powerful as they can and as quick as they can. Now, it's interesting because one of the metrics we use to measure vision is visual processing speed, PSI, which is part of a WACE exam, which is part of a neuropsych, which also speaks to IQ, right? So, which has a big correlation to reading. Reading comprehension.
Absolutely.
So anyway, a strong visual field, not only important on the football field, on the basketball court, also in the classroom, also in, just in life. So that's the first part, is vision. Our athletes, after their baseline, they can go in and train. The training is literally 7 minutes a day. That would take them about 7 to 10 minutes a day. We encourage them to do it minimum of 2 to 3 times a week. They could do it 5 days a week if that's what they wanted to do. The second part of the resilience program, which I think is really the heart of the program, no pun intended, but it's the power, right? So we're teaching our student athletes how to correctly breathe diaphragmatically, right? So there's been lots of research, lots of study that show people that know how to breathe and practice breathing diaphragmatically have a lot of carryover just in how they can handle anxiety, how they can handle depression, how they sleep. You would be surprised, even with student athletes, how many people we have to teach how to breathe, correctly. So this, again, it works to go upstream. We're looking at, when I say upstream, looking more closer to the brain. How are we empowering our student athletes to have the tools to control their autonomic nervous system, right? So we know that in this this dilemma that we have of increased, mental health issues, how much of it is this loop of a dysregulated autonomic nervous system, right? And so my stance, as well as the stance of others, is this problem that we're having, this increase of mental health, is not something that we're just going to talk ourselves out of, right? So talking strategies, absolutely important. We need these strategies. They're probably, for most people, it's the bedrock of our strategy to help with mental health issues. But if we're not looking at coupling that and stacking that with the ability to regulate the autonomic nervous system to help, right? So think of a student athlete going into a counseling session with already a regulated autonomic nervous system, right? Their ability to absorb and change and focus and take in, kind of what they're doing. And then think on the field too, in performance, your ability to control parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system, right? You think of an athlete that maybe steals the ball, dribbles down the court, goes up for a layup, gets fouled, right? Very sympathetic thing that just happened. Now they're going to, if it's a basketball player, now they're going to go shoot some free throws. So now they got to kind of regulate down. They got to gear down and into a parasympathetic. Well, we do this in life all the time, right? And so, two, what we found is by teaching our student athletes to diaphragmatically breathe and use it with them throughout their day, or whether they're trying to go to sleep or just relaxing in class, we can help push them out of this low-level sympathetic state that they could be in just because they're not breathing correctly. Maybe they're breathing in their chest and they're taking short, quick respirations, and the respiration rate is, even at rest, is 12 to 15 breaths per minute. That puts your nervous system into a sympathetic state just sitting in a chair, right? We need our athletes to recover when it's time to recover. We don't need them in a stress state all the time. So that's a tool, again, you learn over time and that you can integrate and call on, as you've learned it. So that's power. And then the last part, which I think is even cooler, is so we'll use what we learned in breathing and in the power to work on focus, right? So we're teaching our athletes through some technology that measures skin conductance and skin temperature, how to also really give their brain a feedback loop that allows them to learn how to be both calm and centered. Now, what we find when we do a lot of the baselining is that our student athletes can get really calm. Like you tell them to relax and be calm, they can get calm.
Yeah.
Their numbers go off the chart. They're like zombie mode, right? But then but at the same time, you're measuring their focus. And what's really interesting is their focus numbers are really bad.
Yeah.
Right. And I tell them, when I talk to teams, I say, look, the person on the field you don't want to meet is your competitor, who can be both calm and centered at the same time. Right. So again, we're good at being calm. We're not good at being calm and centered. And that affects our focus. So we use the technology and the breathing to kind of teach them how to go through these stages where they can not only enhance their ability to be calm, but also be focused at the same time. And that's a danger. I don't care if you're, an athlete or in the workforce or a student. Somebody who can be calm and focused, calm and centered is somebody you don't want to mess with. So that's what we're teaching them also.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's funny. You're making me sit here. I was going, how many times am I breathing? What? I'm going like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I know you're right. I mean, there's so much. It's simple, but there's so much truth to that about the way the autonomic nervous system and how it affects people. I mean, and it totally does. I mean, like, I remember. I'll go down a rabbit trail here just a little bit. When I was in grad school, I used to work for some psychiatrists, and I remember, they would dole out Prozac and whatever other meds, but I remember the best psychiatrists also always prescribed exercise for the clients, because the goal was to stop taking Prozac and all that and become your own pharmacist by exercising and getting endorphins going in your body, so that you work out stress through exercise, and then even neurochemically, give yourself, endorphins instead of having to take pills all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it was great. When the clients that followed what the psychiatrist said with the exercise, they're the ones that did the best.
For sure. I always say, it's a little tongue in cheek, but I always say, thank goodness our athletes exercise, right? I mean, they have to exercise, because all the stress, that they're under, if they didn't at least exercise, it would just be, just be an enormous, just the function of what they do, even though there is a lot of stress with it. The fact that they're very physical and active helps.
Yeah.
Right. It helps to temper that, a little bit. So.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask this. I mean, in your role as a senior associate athletics director, you deal with a lot of different sports, right? And we've got quite a few here at Liberty.
Mm-hmm.
What does this look like in the big picture? Let's go more global. What are the current and future landscape for mental health in regards to college athletics?
Yeah. So, part of the I think part of the focus on why I'll talk about resilience, the resilience lab. Part of the reason why I feel like that's so important is because we have a saying in applied performance, which is the sports science part of a sport, is, or we use the saying. We don't have the saying, but if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right? And so the beauty of something like the resilience lab is you could tell an athlete to, hey, take a breath, and you could tell them, hey, mindfulness and meditation are good things to do. But if you can't measure that for them and show them kind of what's going on internally, it really will take you a long time to just figure that out by feel. Mm-hmm. So we've created loops where we're measuring it, we're giving them feedback. I think mental health is a little bit further behind in medicine, just in terms of the ability to be in front of treating, mental health. So, I've heard someone use the analogy, if you think of, cardiac, heart disease, and when people were starting to have heart attacks, and,
mm-hmm.
The answer was, well, let's hire a bunch more cardiologists so they can do surgery, and it wasn't until later where it was like, hey, we probably should have some dietitians,
mm-hmm.
Working on this preventatively. We should have some training for family medicine, so they're
mm-hmm.
as part of their physicals that they're talking about this, and they're doing some preventative strategies where we are today. And I think mental health has kind of got to get to that point too, which again, I think you got to figure out why we have such an increase. What are those things that are causing increases, in mental health? We know it's here, and we think we know how to kind of take care of it, but we need to be more preventative and get out in front of it. I think the other piece too is just analytics. I don't think we're measuring mental health well. I don't think we're doing well enough in baselining. A lot of what we do in athletics, we're always trying to figure out, if I know where you are to start with, then I have a better chance of taking you where I want you to go,
mm-hmm.
And so I think that's improving and it's getting better. We certainly have some things that we've implemented
mm-hmm.
to give us at least baseline measures of where we think people are. I think that needs to continue to grow and develop. I think we need to get better at that,
mm-hmm.
And not just assume that everyone just needs to go into this bucket based on. That's why I'm so, I just think, the science of neuropsychology and
mm-hmm.
those things are something that really we need to continue to bring into this. And then I think the analytics of looking at the strategies that we're using for mental health. What are the interventions we're using? Are they working? How fast are they working? What things are we coupling those with? For instance, if we put some strategies like a resilience lab with the counseling and the talking strategies for mental health, can we move the needle even quicker mm-hmm. and even further? Can we even be preventative with those things? We think absolutely you can, just based on some of the research. So it's finding out really how to hone that in and get really good at building, an ecosystem for that.
Yeah, I love your whole mindset about all this, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
The quality enhancement basically for the whole mental health process, which I agree, it's really not it's not at the forefront by any stretch.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of preventive medicine for mental health,
Mm-hmm.
oh my goodness. I mean, we're very much on the just dealing with the after effects of things,
Yeah.
rather than being very preventive. And I don't know that you'd have much agreement on preventive mental health.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, I think, it's really interesting, right? So if you look at our mission,
Yeah.
I love what our leadership said the other day, right? So if you're gonna train champions for Christ, you probably need to know Christ yourself, right? A little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go, I wouldn't say further, but I also say, I think if you're going to train champions for Christ, you need to know who Christ is too. And you need to look at his life, right? And the example he was. And we tell our athletes, he is a pretty resilient person, right? But he knew, he also did some things, right, that we want them to do, right? So when it was time for him to rest, he rested, right? He didn't do it alone. He had a group of people around. He had a community, So those are kind of obvious things, that we want to incorporate. I think bringing in the spiritual aspect of all of this, looking at spiritual disciplines. Well, what are spiritual disciplines? Well, if we say a spiritual discipline is anything that allows me to be more Christ-like, then I have to look at, yes, my prayer life, my time in Scripture, but I also have to look at what I'm doing, with myself. Am I sleeping enough? Am I recovering, right? How's my nutrition? How's my, simple things. So for some people, those are in fact, spiritual disciplines. All adds to, how we're kind of, trying to build a preventative model. In other words, saying you can't do all of the things that, all of these things and then not expect, this to happen as well. So.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I mean, like when you mention nutrition, it makes me think of, do people view food as comfort, or do they view it as a discipline in their life too, of providing your body with the stuff that you need to be healthy?
Right.
And I know for a lot of people, including myself, more than I want to admit, food is a comfort item rather than a health issue.
Yeah.
But it's another area of our lives where we can be disciplined, though, right. I guess. So,
yeah.
Well, this is great. I mean, this is you're making me think of all different directions. Makes me think too, like when you're talking about such broad topics of mental performance and people doing their best. Whose responsibility is the mental health of student athletes? Like in your role here, how do you all conceptualize that? Because I know people can sort of get into the blame game when it comes to this stuff too.
Sure. The answer is it's everybody's, right? It really starts with the student athlete.
Yeah.
Right. They have to take responsibility.
Yeah.
For themselves. So it starts there. When we built our 20-page, document that was this is how we're going to handle mental health. And we listed all the people on there that were responsible as being part of this team to help take care of student athletes. We put student athletes on that as well. I mean, they're part of that, not only helping themselves, but helping each other. So it's always our responsibility too, but it is everybody's, right? Yeah. It's nobody can turn, a blind eye to anything. And part of our education process is letting everybody know that they have a role, in that and kind of what your role is. And we're never asking people to go outside of their lane and be something that they're not and try to fix something that they're not equipped to ever fix. But I think the great thing especially here, about our athletic program is we are pretty united, in that, and we really do want the best for our student athletes, and so we're in tune, to those things. So, yeah,
that's great. It's funny when you talk about it's everyone's responsibility. I've been in private practice almost 30 years, And sometimes when mental health people get frustrated, they say, well, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink and all this kind of thing. But even that analogy, though, if you lead the horse to the water, we have to provide the water.
Right. Yeah.
We're part of the process of the help being delivered.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've got to make sure the horse knows where the water is and that there's water there and the water stays fresh. And
That's right.
all that. So, because I know it's easy to try to diffuse responsibility when people need help. So
Yeah.
That's great. Well, gosh, we've covered a lot of ground here today about all these different areas of resiliency and the services you offer here and all. But I always try to sort of wrap things up with a catch-all question. Like, is there something I haven't asked you today that you really have on your heart or mind that you want to share, or just anything maybe the Holy Spirit put on your heart to share today about mental performance or mental health for athletes? Just any final thoughts?
Well, I think one thing for sure, I think as that I may have skipped over. I think part of our strategy for this is a couple years ago we were able to kind of partner with the Shepherds department here on campus, and kind of in a more formal way, we were able to bring some people within athletics, and then PJ Preston kind of runs that effort, and then we had some other great folks that had been kind of embedded as team chaplains. I think of Ed Gomes, who's been with our football program for years. Those people too, and that program. So that if you look at like just the Shepherds program, we now have graduate shepherds that are embedded with all of our with all of our programs.
And graduate shepherds, y'all, is the the student on campus who does the discipleship.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're trained under PJ, and they're trained through the Shepherd's office to kind of be embedded with that team. So it's like think of a team chaplain. That's also another piece that I think helps to set us apart in terms of looking at the full spectrum, and we're always constantly challenged to find ways that we can hand off, even some of the mental health issues, is that how we can do some collaboration, because some people need deep clinical, help that professionals can provide, but others also need, a hand on their shoulder, right? And they need to walk through stuff together. So that's why I'm so excited about our Shepherds program, and the work that PJ's doing that, and with that, and then some of the other things. I think the other, thing, on my heart is we're kind of, I don't want to say we're spoiled in athletics, but we're building the things that we need to be competitive on the field and to keep our athletes, going. Yeah. But I don't think really, aside from building the ecosystem, I think some of the tools and strategies that we use, I think would be just phenomenal for campus in general. I think of our resilience program, for example. We weren't doing that very long as a performance tool before I said, this is as much an academic tool and a mental health tool. And it's an upstream method, to kind of to get ahead of this game, a little bit, and have some different strategies. So that's one of the things, that's on my heart. I don't feel like it's ever something that we should only, have access to. And I know even that program is kind of, I know the LUCOM has kind of dipped their toes in that a little bit, and hopefully they're getting advantage of that. But that's a high stress game, that those guys are doing up there too, going through medical school. And so I just think of, some of these resources that we have been fortunate to have access to and build. I'd love to see them, them scaled out further. And then I think too, the analytics game, I'm always thinking about that too. But we really are fortunate, the tools that we have, and we're really fortunate that we have leadership, at this school that's that is forward thinking and is
Mhm.
always looking for, ways to kind of set the bar, not just keep up. So, yeah.
Well, Lord willing, we can collaborate more. I know there's more of a focus at the university lately on collaboration between schools and
Yeah.
all, whereas in the past, sometimes we were a little bit siloed.
Yeah.
So maybe that could happen. And I know internships between schools also
Yes.
are great, because I know some of our students intern with y'all,
Yep.
and we appreciate that. And
Yeah.
because you bring a neat angle to mental health, the way you approach it, which is really helpful.
Yeah. Well, we have a small sample size, so
Yeah.
we're very good at kind of figuring out real quick if something's going to work or not, and then it's just a matter of how do you scale that out?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I'd say we've got a lot of people listening who might go, wow, this is so cool. This is great. I didn't even know about this sports psychology stuff and the mental performance and all the stuff that you do. Is there a website or something that your department has that if people want to check it out more, they could go to and learn more about what you do?
Well, we have our athletic website that just it shows the staff and some of the departments. I know Dr. Royer, who helped help collaborate and build our resilience program, they have a company called Inner Armor.
Okay.
Forge Your Inner Armor that that they've developed
Mm-hmm.
out of a system like this, and
Mm-hmm.
so there's if you're interested in that type of thing, they have something that they could offer you, and he's done a tremendous amount of work in this space too. But
And then for your office here on campus, though, they go to the Maine Liberty webpage, and then they would search what would they search in the Maine Liberty search box to find your office?
it's actually, if you go under about,
Okay.
you'll look at staff directories. We also our collaboration with CHP, we created Flames Performance Health.
Okay.
So Flames Performance Health too will have kind of a breakdown of nutrition and sports medicine, and it kind of links back and forth. It's kind of an external site, but if you go into athletics and then go to the pull down, go to Champion Performance,
Okay.
it should link you to Flames Performance Health, and that'll give you just a little bit more insight into the kind of the breakdown of Champion Performance.
Well, that's great,
Yeah.
because I know some people always wanted more information and everything. So there you go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
This is a whole new field for me of just seeing not psychology itself, but the application of it and the way you guys do it, which is really, really cool.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. It's been great.
yeah, well, thanks for being on the podcast. And thank you also, folks, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And I hope you're able to join us next time here on Mental Healthy. Thanks so much. Y'all have a good day.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mental Healthy. If you want to hear more episodes, please hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts, and head to linktree.com/mentalhealthypodcast for all of our social media platforms with the latest mental healthy content. If you have a story to share that relates to what we discussed in this episode or any other episode, please contact us at mentalhealthy2020@gmail.com. That's mentalhealthy2020@gmail.com. Thank you, and God bless.